So I'm glad to see such a big crowd here today. This is really, really lovely. I'm going to take a little bit of time to sort of give you an overview of what MSA is, which is not something that you are unfamiliar with, but just in case. Since I'm a neurologist, I feel compelled to give neurologic information. And then we'll talk about some of the, I'm going to say, nitty gritty of trying to live with a condition like MSA. It affects everyone in the family, and it's not an easy diagnosis to hear. So these may be some hopefully helpful things that you can do to help making living with MSA a little bit easier. Multiple system atrophy is the name, as the name implies, it's multiple systems in your brain that are affected. The cells in these systems don't function well, and they don't, and they eventually start to die off. So the first system that is really a problem is the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system controls everything that you don't really need to think about. It's not under your voluntary control, like your blood pressure, like going to the bathroom, like your temperature regulation. All those things are part of your autonomic nervous system. And in conditions like MSA or primary autonomic failure, it stops working. So most people will notice problems with going to the bathroom, urinary dysfunction, that they feel that they have to go more frequently, they have to go more urgently, and at the beginning, and then they develop signs of either Parkinsonism or cerebellar dysfunction. So the classification of multiple system atrophy is divided in that way based on clinical symptoms. Parkinsonism is a combination of stiffness and slowness, and people tend to have some shuffling when they walk. They tend to do everything slower. Handwriting gets smaller. It's difficult to cut food, difficult to button buttons. The cerebellar dysfunction is more of an incoordination. So they're having trouble picking things up. When they eat, they may have trouble getting food to their mouth or grabbing something because they have this ataxia, which is a incoordinated movement. What did I just do? They also have trouble walking, but the walking is starts out more wide-based and more unsteady. They have trouble walking in a narrow space. Speech is affected in both of these conditions, that the speech is harder to understand. It may be more mumbled. It may be more what they call scanning, sort of have a nasal quality to it. But in either condition, the voice will lose its natural inflection, so that the person seems to be talking in a steady level tone rather than the ups and downs that you see when you're asking a question or when you're excited. Both of these conditions also affect facial expression, so that it is hard to gauge somebody's emotional state or their cognitive state by looking at their face. So in a lot of these, a lot of times we have to rely on asking people how they feel. You can't, a lot of families that I see, the spouse will say that the patient looks depressed because they don't have spontaneous facial movement, but the patient says that they're not feeling depressed. So you can't rely on the nonverbal cues that people have to be able to assess how they're feeling or how they're thinking. You actually have to ask them. So it's very important to keep that in mind, that they may not be able to tell you things in the nonverbal way that they used to be able to tell you because of the multiple system atrophy. This is just a quick slide overviewing all the different autonomic dysfunction that you can see in multiple system atrophy. Orthostatic hypotension is the thing that most people worry about most. So that describes a condition where when you're sitting or lying down and you then stand up, your blood pressure drops. You feel dizzy or lightheaded. You might pass out. This usually happens right when you stand up, and you want to make sure that you're standing for a while near a chair in case it happens, so you can sit back down, not that you just take off and start walking and then you're in the middle of the room with nothing to sit down on when you start to feel woozy. There is problems with the urinary system. Or most men will have some issues with erectile dysfunction. At eventually in the course of the disease, it is not always the presenting feature. And then urinary symptoms, where people have trouble going to the bathroom. Sometimes they have urinary retention, sometimes they have overflowing continence, sometimes they have trouble getting started. So if urinary symptoms become a problem, it is really a good idea to see a urologist so that they can address those. There's lots of medicines that can be helpful, so it's worthwhile to see an expert on that to figure out what medicine is best. Constipation is really, really common in this disorder, especially in the Parkinsonian type. Everything moves slowly, so that gives lots of time for the water in your GI tract to get absorbed and makes people constipated. And people also have problems at the other end of their GI tract where they may have trouble swallowing. So when you go to the doctor is going to ask you all those questions about all those things to make sure that nothing is problematic, so you don't need to be sent to a different specialist or tried on a different medicine or aren't at risk of choking or aspirating your food. What do you do now that you have a diagnosis of MSA? How do we live with it? And I think the first step in trying to live with any condition is education. And the fact that you're all here today shows that that's something that you believe in and something that you see the value of. Support groups are a wonderful way to get educated about disease. They bring in different speakers. Other people living with the disease actually can give you information that you may not have. So they're a huge source of material for you to learn about your disease. The internet has a lot of information. I get nervous when people look up things on the internet, because sometimes I think that the people that post things on the internet are people that are doing badly. And the ones that are doing well are out living their life, and they're not sitting at home on their computer posting how horrible they feel. So I think that the internet sometimes will skew the information to a more negative way. So I think that it has its place, and you need to know which websites are reliable to be able to get information. Your doctor, believe it or not, is a good source of information. If your own doctor is not a great source of information or doesn't have many patients with MSA, doesn't know anything, there are specialists in the area that know something about MSA, and you should ask for a referral to one of them. There are plenty of places around in New York and Philadelphia that are doing research on MSA. If you look up clinicaltrials.gov to see what places actually have any studies related to multiple system atrophy, then you would be able to know where to head to find somebody who has some expertise in that field or has a decent amount of experience with the disease. Because what you want is somebody who is not saying, oh, I've never seen this before. You want somebody who has seen a lot of it before, so that they can inform you of what to expect and what to think about and what comes next and what to do about the things that are issues for you. You need to be prepared. Preparedness, I feel like if you take an umbrella, then it doesn't rain on you. So being prepared is a huge way to combat the disease. You know what problems could occur, you get yourself ready for them, and then hopefully that makes them not happen for an extra long time. I took a class in mindfulness, so I'm going to sort of admit that this is why I put this in here. And mindfulness is something where we focus our awareness, our attention on just the present moment. And when we think of something else, we sort of think, that's just a thought, let it go, let's just focus on the here and now. When you get told that you have MSA, when you're living with MSA, your mind is going to go to some catastrophe over here, way in the future. You need to pull it back and live right in the moment, because if you get yourself all worked up about what might be in the future, then it's very hard to appreciate what you have right in front of you right then. Same thing as something bad happened to you in the past and you keep going back to that, then you're not allowing yourself to enjoy the present moment. So I think taking some time every day to stop and take some deep breaths and just be who you are, where you are right then, allows you to function better. Stress is a huge thing. Mindfulness is typically focusing on your breathing, so it's something that everybody can do. We can all right, I want you all to sit here, and I want you to you don't even have to close your eyes, but I want you to take a really deep breath and then let it go. Do you feel different? Do you feel how just that act of taking a deep breath and letting it go, it tones you down, it relaxes you just a teeny bit. And that is something that you can do every day, multiple times a day when you feel you need it. Just stop and breathe. And pay attention to the fact that it actually makes you feel a little bit more relaxed, a little bit calmer. And if you do that before you go to do something else, it sort of stops that spiral of thoughts or whatever is stressing you out at that moment and allows you to just focus on breathing and being in the present moment. It is very, very helpful. And I have found that I use it a lot of times if I'm going in to see a patient and I think this is going to be, this is going to be a bad encounter. They're going to be upset when I go in there. I do it in front of the exam room door before I walk in. I take a deep breath and I tone myself down and then I walk in there and it makes everything go a little bit easier. So this is something that we can all use. It's not medicine and it can significantly help. This is sort of exactly what I said before, but our mind is constantly on the move. I mean, our brains are made for thinking and that's what we do, but sometimes the thinking is a little detrimental to our health because we're reflecting back on the past, what we had before, what we don't have now, what we did before that we're sorry that we did and we can't go back and undo it, and the future, worrying about what's going to happen, anticipating what's going to happen, worrying. It's an energy drain when you do all that stuff. So trying to appreciate just a moment of stillness allows you to get your energy back and move on. Symptoms sort of flow in a cycle. You have a disease, it makes you feel different than you felt before. A lot of people with MSA feel tired, feel tense, feel worried, then they get stressed, then they get frustrated, then they get depressed, and it's a vicious cycle that goes over and over again. That the disease makes you feel one thing and then that leads to other emotions that just feed on themselves in a bad, bad circle of symptoms. So managing stress is hugely important in trying to live with MSA, live with any chronic disease, because chronic stress is bad. You all read about that in magazines and on the news about how much stress impacts our health. And stress makes everything worse. It increases your cortisol level, it messes with your blood sugar, it messes with your blood pressure, it messes with your sleep cycle. So you really we all need to work on managing our stress and finding a way to sort of tone it down to a manageable level. There is a lot of research that's going on into the effects of stress on the body. And there is no magic pill that gets rid of stress. And living life is stressful. We just had a big snowstorm. That was a big stressor. How am I going to get to work? Who's going to shovel my driveway? What am I going to, how are my patients going to get in to see me? What happens if the power goes out and my food all spoils in my refrigerator? So all those things are going through my head when I don't actually need them to. I should just be looking out the window saying it's so quiet outside. The snow looks beautiful. And let me just read my book in my living room and enjoy my day off, which is actually what I did after I finished shoveling the snow. Foods. Everybody asks about food. What can you eat? What is a good diet for my specific condition? The truth is that there is no specific diet for MSA. Um, Foods that are good for your brain in general include caffeine, which is always good, keeps you alert. It actually helps to bring your blood pressure up, which is good for people who have orthostatic hypotension. There are a lot of spices that are good to add to your food. Cinnamon, um, turmeric, vanilla, ginger, all of these may help to boost your brain power. Um, Cumin, which is a spice that is used in a lot of Indian dishes, or turmeric, is helpful. They have done research that this may bind to amyloid plaques in the people who have Alzheimer's disease and reduce their numbers. So it's something, if you like the taste of it, to add to some of your food may help to keep your brain cells a little bit alive a little bit longer and doing better for a longer period of time. The Mediterranean diet is still, I think there was just some report where they looked at all the different diets of what is supposed to be the best diet for people, and I think the Mediterranean diet is up there as one of the best diets, the easiest to stick to and the best for your body. A diet full of fish, vegetables, fruits, nuts, not so much red meat, and not sort of exclusive of anything, but really trying to stick to healthy foods, a lot of vegetables. It actually can reduce the risk for Alzheimer's disease. That kind of diet is good for everybody. Having vegetables in any form is a good thing. So if you can't eat an apple, if you can't eat a grapefruit, if you can't eat a tomato, you could drink tomato juice. You could drink apple juice. You could make some kind of smoothie with a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables in it. And you could even put kale in it if you want to, but I would never eat that. Fatty fish has a lot of omega-3s in it, which is what is supposed to be good for your heart and your brain. So taking fish oil supplements is something that a lot of people do to try and protect their brains. But actually eating the oily fish is better for you because there are other fish oils in the fish that are not in the capsules that can help your brain. So trying to have some fish in your diet is a good idea. It doesn't have to be cooked fish. You can eat sushi, but that kind of having natural fish oils is very good for you. Walnuts actually can help with memory, believe it or not. There is something good in the walnuts that helps the cells in your brain communicate with each other. So that's why nuts are good for you. Spinach, unless you're on a blood thinner, like Coumadin, is a good medicine. It has magnesium in it and will actually help blood flow. It sort of dilates your blood vessels and helps blood flow to the brain. So that's another good thing. Olive oil, all of these things are sort of part of that Mediterranean diet. But again, the polyphenols and the fatty acids help reduce inflammation. And one of the theories of neurodegenerative disease is always that there is some kind of inflammation in your brain that you want to tone down. So this may help that. Flaxseed, B12, folate, all of those things need to be, it can be consumed to try and help you. Dark chocolate, I just put in the plug for chocolate, just like I bash kale. But just a few ounces of dark chocolate, again, improves blood flow to the brain and helps with concentration. But you really want the darkest chocolate, whereas I'm a fan of milk chocolate, so not so good for my brain, but dark chocolate is good. Keeping your calcium level the way it should be, especially in a condition like multiple system atrophy. You want your calcium and your vitamin D to be up where they should be, because you have the potential to lose your balance and to fall, and you want your bones to be as strong as possible so that you don't break them. So calcium is available in dairy products, but also an easy way to get calcium is just to eat like Tums. Some antacids are made of calcium, and then they come in all different flavors, and so it's easy to ingest. Sleep, which I'm just going to mention briefly, is hugely important. Getting a good night's sleep is good for your brain. Your brain has a lymphatic system that works at night to get rid of all the sort of the toxins in your brain and clean it up. So you really need to get a good night's sleep. So talking to your doctor about how you're sleeping, what the issues are with sleep, and there are many in MSA. You need to really make sure that your sleep is optimized. You want to make sure that you get the most from your doctor's visit. So you want to prepare for your appointment. You know, I'll tell you from a doctor's perspective that most practices want doctors to see patients as fast as possible and as many as possible to make as much money as possible, which is really not possible when you have a lot of questions for your doctor. So making a list of the questions that you have so that you can get them answered, prioritize your questions. What is the most important couple questions that I have for today, and are other questions something that I could save for next time? Come with a pen and paper. Some people record their visits if they have trouble writing. Some people have somebody else with them who writes things down for them or takes notes on their phone. But make sure that you write down your questions so you don't forget them, because I can't tell you how many times I have people come into the office and they're like, I had something I wanted to ask you, and then they don't remember it, and then we go through the whole visit and it still hasn't come back to them, and so they never get to ask me that. So if between visits you write down your questions that you have for the doctor so you can store them all up till you're face to face and you can get an answer. Don't come to the doctor alone. Everybody hears things differently and everybody will remember different things. So if you have a second pair of ears there, then you both will get more out of the doctor's visit. You also want somebody else to give information. If the doctor says to you, are you having any trouble with your speech? Can people hear you? Do people ask you to repeat? And you say, no, my speech is loud. And your spouse says, nobody can hear you. You know, the kids can't hear you on the phone when you call. So you need somebody to give an outside opinion about what's going on. Just because sometimes the way we see ourselves is not the way other people see us. And I would say speech is the biggest example. Although usually I have one spouse saying, you're too soft, and the other one says you can't hear, and it's a little drama in the office. But you want that second pair of ears there to hear what the doctor says and to make sure that you're telling the doctor all the issues that you're actually having. Be honest. The doctor, although I feel great when my patients come in and say, I'm doing wonderfully, you know, that medicine you put me on, I'm so much better now. That is not the goal. Your goal is not to make me happy. It is to feel better. So you've got to tell me the truth. If you're running to the bathroom 20 times a day and you can't make it sometimes because your mobility is limited or because the sensation comes on you and then the urine comes out, that's something that you need to mention. It doesn't make me happy to hear that you have no urinary symptoms when this is your actual life and it's not being addressed when it could be addressed. So definitely honesty is the best policy with your doctor. You want to tell them everything. There is probably nothing that they haven't heard, so don't be embarrassed to say whatever the thing is, because they've heard it before and they may have suggestions on how to manage it. Another important thing, make a list of your medicines, the names of the medicines, the strength of the medicine, how you take it, and the times that you take the medicine. Every medicine that you take, if you take flaxseed, if you take garlic pills, if you take coenzyme Q10, that needs to be on your list too, because there are interactions between some supplements and some medications that you might need to be prescribed, and your doctor needs to know everything that you're taking so that they can, if they want to adjust things, they can do it safely for you. This is huge. I can't tell you how much time I spend in an individual patient visit trying to reconcile the medicines that the patient is taking with what is written down or in the computer in their chart. It's hugely important, because then if you call and you say, you know, this medicine, it isn't enough for me, I need to be able to look back at your chart and know exactly how much you were taking, what time you were taking, if you're taking any other medicine that is interacting with it around that time, so that all the medicine is accurate. So come with a list or come with the bottles of pills, but frequently doctors will change things over the phone. You call and say, you know, I'm taking 200 milligrams of ibuprofen for my back pain, but it doesn't work, and your doctor says, okay, take 400, then even though the bottle may say 200, you are taking it differently. So it isn't always going to match up with what it says on the bottle if you've changed it since you have refilled prescription. So this is a huge thing that is helpful to both your doctor and yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask the doctor again. Just say, I don't understand what you're saying. Could you explain that again? Make them translated into English. You don't need to hear a bunch of big medical words. You need to hear something that you can understand. Ask the doctor what to expect for the future. Ask about research. Definitely always ask about research. What's going on? Is there something that I could participate in? Is this something that could potentially benefit me? If you read something in the paper, on the internet, wherever, and you want to ask some questions about it, don't be embarrassed to bring that into the doctor. I have tons of patients who do that, and that's what I tell the residents and the medical students that work with me. And that's why I like working with this group of people, is because they're very knowledgeable and they look for stuff and they keep me on my toes and keep me up to date, because sometimes they bring me stuff that I never heard of before, and I have to look it up and figure out what it is and whether it's good or whether it's bad. So don't hesitate to do that, because you may find something that would be beneficial and maybe your doctor didn't know about it and you could try it. So it certainly never hurts you to do that. Don't be afraid to ask for another opinion. If you feel like the doctor that you're seeing is not knowledgeable enough about your condition, or you just don't feel comfortable with what their recommendations are, then ask for another opinion. And tell your doctors if you want them to communicate with each other. So if you have a family doctor that you want to keep in the loop, if you have a psychiatrist that you want to keep in the loop, definitely make sure that they communicate with each other. Exercise, which you're going to hear about later, is hugely important to keeping your brain healthy. The more you do with your body, the more you're going to be able to do with your body. So you want to do resistance training. You want aqua therapy is wonderful. Being in the water, if you can swim and if you enjoy it, is great. It doesn't put the stress on your joints that being on land does. You can stretch into a lot of different positions, and it also, the buoyancy of the water is helpful to keep your blood pressure up, so that you don't get hypotensive when you're in the pool, and you're able to do a lot more stuff there. Postural exercises, trying to work on your balance, trying to work on your core strength so that you're not leaning over or falling out of your chair, so that you can stand up straight, so your center of gravity is in the center of your body and not in front of you, which makes you more likely to fall, is very important. Safety issues, again, to look at your home to see what's in the way so that you can still do as much as you want to do without jeopardizing your safety. If it comes to the point where you need a wheelchair, then doing a wheelchair assessment with somebody who is skilled in that, so they can figure out what wheelchair is most comfortable for you, and how to position yourself in that wheelchair, how to propel yourself in that wheelchair, Because all this kind of adaptive equipment, there's so much of it out there, and there are different ones that are better in different situations. Smaller walkers, wheeled walkers, lightweight wheelchairs that you can put in the car, scooters that you can drive so nobody has to push you. So all of that, that kind of wheelchair assessment is very important, so the appropriate device can be recommended for you. And I think you're going to have a talk on exercise later in the day. So that's my 2 cents on trying to live with multiple system atrophy. I think we'll have some questions, time for questions a little later.